Hello, everyone. Happy almost spring. Maybe it'll be closer to spring when we release this episode, but it's definitely in the air. I'm here today with Lana Martin, who I'm really excited to chat with. She is a human behavior expert and mentor, and she has a wide range of specializations and expertise, ranging from, which is something I'm really excited to talk about, psychedelic education and integration, cognitive behavior support, relationship and parenting mentorship, chronic health healing, spiritual guidance, early entrepreneurial, that word gets me every time, business coaching, somatic and breathwork therapy, and she actually started a big portion of her career in midwifery and childbirth expertise, which she isn't currently practicing, but she does like to refer to herself as a midwife still because it is like birthing your masterpiece of your life is kind of her motto. So, hello, Lana. How are you?
Hi, Katie. Thank you so much for having me. I
Yeah.
am really excited to talk with you and get to share all of the exciting world of what's going on in sober, curious living these days.
Yeah, exactly. I know. I know it's really cool because you've been sober for years and years. And so I really loved the idea of chatting with you because I think that there's this like growing emergence of like sober curiosity and people reevaluating their relationship to alcohol specifically. But it does kind of leave this like ambiguous area for other substances. And at the same time, we have this developing acknowledgement of the therapeutic benefit of psychedelics and more becoming more and more mainstream. And so, like, where does that fit into the sober curious journey? Where does it fit into the healing journey? I want to get into all of that because I think there's a lot of nuance and it's really cool to start breaking free of some of that black and white thinking.
Mhm.
And so, yeah, I wanted to kick things off with you just sharing about your own sobriety journey and then where plant medicine wove into that for you.
Awesome. Yeah, I would be happy to share that. So I don't actually label myself as sober,
Hmm.
though I haven't drank alcohol in quite a long time. Uh, I would say when I really took it to heart, like made a decision, like I think alcohol is making its way out of my life, was about 15 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And that feels wild to say.
Yeah.
Previous to that, I was a bartender and I managed bars and restaurants. So alcohol was a really big part of my life at the time that I made the decision to stop consuming it. I just had no idea that was coming. And the big motivator was that I became pregnant and I was about to become a mom for the first time. Alcohol really wasn't doing great things for me in life. Um, I certainly consumed too much of it too frequently, being in a restaurant and bar atmosphere, 5 days a week. And I come from a history of both paternal and maternal side of my family of alcoholism, all the way back, aunts, uncles, grandparents. There were plenty of motivating factors for me to make that change, but really it was discovering that I was pregnant. And I say often that my daughter changed my life, and she's been my biggest teacher. And I'm sure many of us who are parents feel that way and notice a profound shift in who we are from pre-kids to after kids. But this was one of the biggest ways, like she really set me on my path. Her arrival both motivated me to stop drinking and also was my primary motivation to become a midwife. So it really like changed the whole trajectory of my life. And I just felt like such a better mom and a better person and so much more centered, and my capacity to just be in life in a meaningful way and in a grounded way grew quite a lot. And then, of course, becoming a midwife and a birth doula when my daughter was quite young, that career is not super conducive to having regular relationship with alcohol, just the on-call schedule. So many things changed, and it just felt like, yeah, I think I'm done with this.
Yeah. And so then it wasn't really you said it was having like a problematic impact, but that you just kind of moved away from it. And do you feel like there's any pieces of like what was your approach to sustainability or what contributed to sustainability for you? Because I know it doesn't sound like you went down a traditional path of recovery, nor was it like necessarily a big rock bottom. So what
Yeah.
was your trajectory through so not sobriety, but sustainable alcohol-free living?
Yeah. Yeah.
It is
You
weird, the
know,
sobriety word, sometimes it's like there's so much that goes with it. I totally understand. I always waffle between saying like sober and alcohol-free and non-drinker. I'm like,
mhm.
I don't really resonate with like sober, but so I totally get it.
I wonder if some of that is because up until recently, for the last several decades, anyone who didn't drink mostly was sober. There
Mhm.
was like that term really meant that you quit something that you probably had a challenging relationship with, a dependency on, and maybe needed a support system, AA, some kind of like recovery element. And I think that was just really pervasive. Like that was how it was done.
Mhm.
And now I'm noticing a shift of just there's so many more people who just don't drink, millennials and like younger people who just never really get into it and pick it up. So they're just like non-drinkers, right? So they're,
Yeah.
and we also use sober as like a verb, right? Like getting sober. It's
Yeah.
like an event that happens. So if you never had to get sober, but you don't drink, what are
Right.
you,
Yeah.
right? So,
Yeah, and you don't want to like take away from like what that means for people who did go through like physical addiction and, extreme hardships because of it. And it's like, well, I don't want to feel like it almost feels like you're intruding on like what that has meant for a lot of people to say it when it's like, well, am I technically sober if I do microdose? And even
yeah,
though
great
that's not
question.
ever my drug of choice or it wasn't problematic for me, it's not like a something that you lean on as a crutch. It's more of like an expansive tool. But yeah, it's like we're just finding the stride with that is interesting to see the evolution of it societally, the word and how different people identify and whatnot. And so, yeah, anything in particular that was part of making it sustainable for you? I imagine plant medicine might have played a role.
It actually didn't.
It
Uh,
didn't?
it
Oh,
didn't. That came later.
yeah.
I
Tell me
feel
more.
so fortunate in that I didn't really have a hard time making
Mm,
the decision.
yeah.
Um, and that's part of why, to your point, I think when you say, oh, I'm sober, there's an implication there about part of your path that there was an extreme effort. There was, you really made a big commitment and went through various processes and whatever types of support to get there, right? And I didn't do that. And so I really like to honor the people who have had to walk that path. And that wasn't mine. I found it remarkably easy. Yeah, it just, for me, it was just time. It was just, this
Yeah.
isn't part of my life anymore. And I'm really committed to becoming a certain kind of person who lives a certain lifestyle, who works these insane on call hours and is taking care of her little human. And it just, it just wasn't hard. I will say that when I first started moving toward not drinking, it was kind of a phase. And if you traced back the last, really, my daughter's about to turn 18. So the last 18 years from pregnancy when I didn't drink into the period after where I started drinking again a bit. And then when it phased out, there were moments in there where I did have a glass of wine, drink a cocktail in Mexico. And that's another reason I don't say I'm sober, because in the last 18 years, I can point to moments where I did have a drink.
Mhm.
But each time I did, it was like, oh yeah, right, I don't like this.
Yeah.
For me, I found a level of aliveness that is so wonderful that when I drink, I feel worse pretty immediately.
Hmm.
And so I tend to joke, any of you on the dating apps, in the bio, I do always point out that I don't drink, but I say like, I don't drink alcohol, I'm already lit up. Uh,
Yeah.
and that's what it was for me. It's like I found a kind of joy, a kind of aliveness that alcohol reduced. And before, my drinking did actually kind of like make me feel more alive and outgoing. And so I wish I could say there was some tool that made it easier, but I just was one of the lucky
Well,
ones that just said, I'm just not doing this anymore. I mean, the tool was like my choice in career and my choice in parenting and just how I wanted to show up to my life.
yeah, that is a tool, I think, because your whole, there's a lot of factors like holistically coalescing that kind of supported ushering you away from it that you were leaning into, which I think is actually like a really big tool. So many people have like compounding variables coming down on them, like trying to usher them towards change, but they
Uh-huh.
resist. And I think that you really leaned in and you're like, all right, my life is moving in a new direction. I'm going to go with the flow instead of continue to fight to keep this in my life when it's clearly not really supporting the life that I'm moving towards. But it's funny, I worked in the hospitality industry for 15 years too. So I think you get like a really heavy dosage of drinking in that industry. And I kind of felt the same when I stopped drinking. I felt like it was a little more challenging than maybe for you, but I also totally relate to the um, like coalescing variables. Like I moved out of the city into like Ipswich. I left hospitality. I
Yeah.
had a new environment. I had finished grad school. So it was like all these things, that same thing. I was like, might as well lean in, to this.
Yeah, yeah, it's a good point. And I really, I don't know how well I would have done if I stayed in hospitality. And I commend those of you out there who managed to be
Yeah,
sober and work in that environment.
I know.
I think I could do it now, but at that time, that probably would have been really
Yeah.
challenging. Um,
Right.
yeah.
Hmm. I know. I think I did do like a couple dry months when I was in hospitality. That was like the early stages of my sober curiosity, and it was not easy.
Yeah. Yeah. My last industry related job was managing a wine bar. And so I tasted dozens of wines a week to fill
Mm.
the shelves. But you're spitting when you're doing that. But I did spend quite a bit of that time as like not very much a drinker, but I definitely still drank. And maybe that helped start the taper, right? Because that
Yeah.
environment, it was easier to not drink. It wasn't like a party bar or
Yeah,
yeah, yeah.
totally. That makes a lot of sense. Yeah, so you kind of organically moved away from it, and then share with us about where plant medicine did come onto the scene.
Yeah. So several years after I stopped drinking, I started having um, various chronic health problems. And I'll actually revise that. The health problems started while I was still drinking, but they became much louder and more pronounced and more impactful to my lifestyle over the first few years of not drinking. And eventually, the health problems kind of took over. And so my quality of life really changed. I went from being a very active rock climber, hit trainer, CrossFitter, power lifter, all the things, and also doing birth work, which was just really physically demanding,
Mm.
and started to not really be able to do any of those things. And eventually spent a couple of years actually existing primarily in my bed. So my health really did a full 180. And in my attempt to get well, I easily spent over $100,000, many years, numerous functional medicine doctors, naturopaths, and acupuncturists, and everything in between. And while things shifted, it felt like a revolving door of symptoms. So I would just experience something for a year and then it would be compound and then something else. And then the first thing would kind of go away. But now I have these three new things. And it was really quite challenging. And eventually, I got this little whisper to move out of the state I was living in and relocate to a slightly bigger community. And it didn't make a lot of sense on paper, but I'm pretty good at listening even when it doesn't seem like there's a rational reason. And as soon as I relocated, I found myself introduced to a plant medicine community. And as I started attending ceremonies or gatherings with them and utilizing, at that time it was ayahuasca, I experienced really tremendous healing every single time. And I felt myself getting better. I also met who I call my teacher there, and he, using other modalities, nothing to do with psychedelics or plant medicine, the two together started to make a really profound difference. And I attribute much of my rejuvenation and vitality to that process of becoming well versed in a variety of entheogens or psychedelics, and doing a lot of really deep belief work and subconscious rewiring. And at the level of beliefs, and at the level that psychedelics work on, suddenly healing happened.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, that's so cool. And so, can you, if you're open to it, do you mind sharing in what ways do you think that the entheogens or psychedelics did create space for healing? Like, what might, for example,
Mhm.
what beliefs do you feel like you unearthed or shifted that were helpful? What really shifted for you that you did not find with a functional medicine doctor or
Yeah.
naturopath in the hundreds of thousands of dollars that you spent?
Yeah. Yeah. It was like easily over 100 grand, which just boggles my mind. Um, so the primary shift that I can name and that I now subsequently have seen over and over in the decade plus that I've been doing this work with others is that, and I wouldn't have been able to name it in this way then, but ultimately everything that exists in the physical begins in the non-physical. So if you think about it scientifically, it makes sense that every single thing that comes into existence starts first in the non-physical realm as an idea in someone's imagination, right?
Right.
And then it's created and it takes form.
Hmm.
And that includes us, our bodies. So we start as a non-physical being and then we create our physicality, and it's always creating itself, and there's cellular changeover. And so it's like there is a blueprint and the cells are always adapting to match this blueprint. And the body is always producing symptoms that move it toward harmony or optimal, optimal
Homeostasis.
well-being. Yeah, and
Yeah.
homeostasis. So our every symptom we experience is the body's attempt to bring harmony and homeostasis to its existence. And that shift of just realizing that the symptoms were not indication of something wrong, but actually an attempt to make things whole, really changed how I approached my healthcare. And it eventually led to why I have this laundry list of things that I help support people with now, because I've really got to see that if it's true that everything that exists in the physical starts in the non-physical, then I can really help people in all sorts of ways, whether it be relationships, finances, or health, right? Because it all does start in the non-physical. So the biggest thing that I think psychedelics did was help me to be able to uncover certain subconscious patterns that I was blind to. Our egos are really, really beautifully designed for survival, right?
Okay.
And yeah, that's their job and they're great at it. And I'm super happy about having an ego because it means I get to be in a body and have this life experience. And sometimes when we have significant experiences in our past that we would call traumatic, it can be really hard to uncover the beliefs. I look at the brain and the mind like an operating system, right? And periodically, the operating system of your phone needs to be updated for it to work optimally. And so does the operating system of our mind. But that programming happens between conception and age 7 when our brain is in theta state and we believe everything we're experiencing and how we're perceiving those experiences to be like a fixed truth about
Reality. Yeah.
reality. Yeah, it's like this is how it is objectively. So we make
Yeah.
lots of beliefs or programs about ourselves, others, and reality, and then we go operating along the rest of our life like that's how it is. And we're kind of blind to the way those beliefs are perpetuating what we might call traumatic or negative experiences.
Hmm.
So,
Yeah,
for me,
realizing it's just one lens that you're looking through and there's like many options as opposed to like blindly looking through the one lens as factual truth.
yes, yes.
Hmm.
Yeah, and you have to be aware that you're looking through a lens in the first place and that it
Right,
might
right.
be
And so
like
many people,
augmenting your view depending
yeah,
on the color
exactly.
and the shade of yeah, how it's perceiving things.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so for me, psychedelics just did a couple of things. One is like in the beginning of my work with ayahuasca, I had tremendous like physical experiences where my body, I would have what is now called TRE shaking. And I could feel things literally like reorganizing in my physical structure. It was really quite fascinating. But also, it's like the beautiful thing about psychedelics is they help bypass the ego and open up the door to the subconscious without so much resistance so that you can become aware, which is the most important part of existing. It's like our awareness is everything, and it's the doorway into creating this masterpiece life that's possible. So we can't create anything we can't imagine or be aware of, right? So psychedelics helped me to become aware of some of these buried hidden programs and how and perceptions, really, to just put it simply, like, oh, this is how I'm perceiving these experiences, and it's creating a story that is showing up in my body as a symptom.
Yeah. I think people understanding how much their belief systems impact their health. I mean, we can see that pretty clearly even with just like the perception of stress and the
Yeah.
impact that has, but it's such an interesting ride waking up to your programming and realizing, oh wow, I have a choice here.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, so the kind of evolution for you sounds like a big piece was addressing blind spots, removing some of those limiting beliefs, recognizing that you had them in the first place.
That was a huge part of it. Absolutely. And just um, I think the level of compassion for myself and for humanity and for the fact that this is how this all works, that our beliefs are actually creating everything about our experience of reality. Um, it was for me, it was really empowering. And I will say not everyone feels that way. Like you just mentioned this, you know, it's like I have the ability to heal. I have the ability to create anything I want. I am creating everything I'm experiencing. So if I'm creating something I don't like, I have the power to change that. When I become empowered and am not feeling victimized and giving my power away to these stories and experiences, I found that to be really comforting and motivating. It was like, okay, so I don't need to keep spending money on doctors and looking for some like magical needle in a haystack that I so far haven't been able to find. In fact, I'm the only person who can fix this. And to me, that was like such a relief and so motivating. It's like, I'm doing this so I can fix it. And I understand that for some people, that's a bit of a leap they have to make. Because we want to believe sometimes that something outside of us can do it.
It's a
And
mindset that is hard.
yeah, yeah, like I would never make myself this sick, right? And it's like, well, no, consciously, of course not, of course we wouldn't, right? But what we're capable of doing subconsciously or unconsciously is pretty amazing. And
Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
And like you said too, that so much of our, the way that we respond to the world is shaped from experiences like a lot of times we don't even remember or
yeah.
consciously attribute our personality to. I actually, it's interesting because my family had a traumatic car accident when I was a baby. And it definitely like shaped the trajectory of like my entire upbringing, but I was so dismissive of like any impact that that may have ever had on anything. I'm like, yeah, yeah. I remember I used to be embarrassed to like tell people that like I lost family members and this like big event that happened
Mm.
because I felt so disconnected from it because I couldn't remember I was a baby. And I almost felt like shameful ever sharing it because I didn't want to like make people feel bad for me. And
Oh,
it's so interesting now looking back, being like, it's crazy that you thought like having gone through that just because you don't remember it. Like you were physically present, cellular
yeah.
impacted in every
Cellularly, you
way.
remember. Yeah.
Yeah.
The
Like,
level of your like essence, you remember. It's very much a part of your, yeah, experiences.
yeah, exactly. So, I we kind of touched upon too, like this idea of like what does sobriety mean and like where does plant medicine fit in? And I think like that stigmatization of sobriety being like no substances at all. But I'd love to hear your thoughts on how you think microdosing could potentially be like a therapeutic agent along a sober, curious, or even like trying to be fully sober path.
Mm, yeah, this is a subject that I really hope gets talked about very, very broadly because it's important and I think it's worth us. It's like one step we can take in starting to expand our awareness, which is like the important part of accomplishing anything that we want in terms of leading a life that feels fulfilling. Is like we have to be able to expand our awareness of like what's possible and what we believe and hold paradox and hold like complex and maybe competing ideas at the same time. And this is one of them. So the the way I look at it is most people who have a dependency on alcohol use it to help them not feel, to numb, to cope, right? And there's a numbing, there's like a less feeling aspect of drinking. Entheogens or psychedelics make you feel.
They're like the opposite.
They're the opposite, right?
They're
I
pushing
have
everything out from under the rug, whether you like
exactly,
it.
exactly. It's like all on the surface now. They're lighting it up with a big old spotlight.
Yeah.
Um, I have a friend who is in AA, and he said, oh, I got into drinking really young, and in high school, I never got into using psychedelics even recreationally because they made me feel too much. And I think it's just so, he was so aware that he was like, I was trying to shut that off, not light
Yeah.
it up,
Yeah.
right? So this is where I think they're really in very different categories in terms of medicinal benefits, right? So, alcohol, I think, for the most part, is not an effective medicinal tool.
Mm.
And unless you're like in the
A tincture.
wilderness and you need stitches and you need to like pour some on a wound, then it's very helpful, right? Or like, yeah, making tincture. But plants, even non-psychoactive plants, have so many medicinal properties and really are our allies. And we use herbs and culinary experiences and food and medicine. And psychoactive plants, I really believe, are the same. And then we have dosage that directly impacts how psychoactive of an experience that you have, and what makes it more of a psychedelic versus just activating your neural network in different ways. So one thing that I notice is that the typical paths to sobriety, like AA, for example, and they blatantly make this clear that they really aren't there for the therapy aspect, or, that you should seek out complementary therapeutic modalities because they're really just focused on one aspect of sobriety. So depending on why you feel like you're having an unhealthy or dependent relationship with alcohol, you're probably going to need help dealing with the why. What's going on there. And microdosing and psychedelic use in general, even larger doses, can be a really, really powerful way to uncover those deeper core issues that led to the alcohol dependency or the unhealthy relationship with alcohol in the first place. And at the level of a microdose, you're not really experiencing any sort of altered state. And this is kind of one of the areas where we all get to decide, like, are all altered states bad, or are altered, because we can achieve altered states with breath work.
Yeah.
we can achieve altered states with meditation. People
Right.
have been achieving altered states with meditation for 5,000 years, right? So
Yeah. And
documented. So,
it's all like so I feel like people, this is another example where people like kind of want to like fast track, or like for like microdosing, for example, is like you're not, yeah, like you mentioned, it's not like a altered state. It's kind of this like subtle therapeutic tool. But then you do have people who will like go do like an ayahuasca trip in the woods, like full blown, whatever. But it's like, I think which can be great as well if you're integrating and actually like practicing the changes outside of that. So I feel like there is so much nuance in kind of the way that you're using it and how you're using it, and if you're using it as another like escape or external fix versus like I'm working this and I'm
mhm.
doing the work while I do it. And yeah, for me and my perspective with microdosing and psychedelics is I really think, alcohol is like more constrictive, whereas psychedelics are more expansive. And when you were talking about programming as well, I think one of the biggest things I see with sober and sober curious clients is this like real need to realize like that they are programmed around
Mm,
alcohol in the first place. And I think like a lot of people, if they've been drinking their whole lives, like not only have they not realized that they've been completely programmed around alcohol consumption, but they likely haven't looked at like any of their programming. And so, or any of their beliefs that like any of their experiences that have shaped the way that they may have wounding that has led to self-medication. And that's where I feel like microdosing and that development of awareness around our programming is such a healing tool for sobriety, sober curiosity. Like it aids you and exploring one of the major limitations that's perpetuating a toxic relationship with alcohol. And it's also just like everything is based on perspective too, because you think about it and you're like, okay, so there's like, this breaking of stigma around plant medicine, but you wouldn't bat an eye if a sober person was prescribed to an anti-anxiety. You wouldn't say like, oh, well, you're not like technically sober because you take a prescription drug. You'd be like, oh, it's a prescription drug. Like that doesn't count. So it's like if it's a therapeutic agent, but it's prescribed by big pharma, you're still sober. But if like it's a therapeutic agent prescribed by nature, you're not. To me, that doesn't seem like it doesn't like line up in my thinking,
mhm.
but that's just me.
Yeah, you bring up a really, really good point because, of course, prescription medications, mood stabilizers, SSRIs, all those amphetamines. I mean, Adderall is straight amphetamine.
It
So,
literally
and
says like meth salt on the
yes,
thing,
yes.
on the
So
pill.
those things are absolutely psychoactive and altering your state of consciousness, and they're highly addictive.
Mhm.
And this is one of the reasons I think microdosing can really fill a very important gap in the current model of how we're going about sobriety, and like the structure in place to support people in that is that psychedelics are not addictive.
Yeah.
You can certainly be the person who's going off into the woods to drink ayahuasca and have these big experiences and get addicted to the experience and the continual avoidance of the real work,
Hmm.
but the substance itself has no physically addictive properties.
Yeah. Yeah. And I say all that to say too, like I definitely encourage people to find the path that works for them. And if that includes like pharma, then totally do it. There's definitely no judgment. I think it's just about that awareness that there are options. And just because like our programming tells us one thing, like always stay curious, always keep looking, like keep an open mind because there is reasons that like our programming is um calibrated in certain ways that like lend itself towards things that make money versus things that don't is just like one of many things. But yeah, just being aware that like there's narratives, there's ways of thinking, and like we always get to decide what works for us. And if it is SSRIs, then that's great. And whatever like people can find that allows them to find their way, that's beautiful. But it is interesting to think of how addictive they can be and like how it's also preventing us from kind of like truly, truly processing. And I've yeah, like had people getting off of them saying like how raw they feel and how hard it is after like years of having their medication upped and upped and upped. Like, oh, I'm stressed out still. It's like, well, yeah, but then if you're never kind of addressing the root cause, like it's same festering cesspool of trauma and stuff in there.
Yep. I am really grateful that there are options and that people who find themselves in a deeply acute situation and need an acute support system can utilize pharmaceutical medications for that. And beyond acute treatment, they have so many drawbacks and side effects. And as you just named, people experience tons of challenge with them not working well, or then there's like a whole process of tapering onto meds where your mood is unstable, and then finding the right dose and the right combination, and then dealing with now I have no libido, now I don't feel anything, I can't feel joy, I'm just kind of numb. One whole vein of my business is supporting people who are desperately trying to get off of pharmaceutical medication. Call it medication metamorphosis. And there are people whose quality of life has been really deeply impacted by being a dependent on prescription medication to do their day, but are not having a quality of life. They don't feel very alive. They're just like, I'm just existing, I'm just getting by. And it's incredibly difficult to get off of these meds, especially when you've been on them long term, and if you're on more than one. The body really it takes a long time for the brain to adapt and for the body to recover from the way the medications are manipulating the brain chemistry.
Mhm.
So, yes, if you feel like that's your path and it's working for you, all the power to you. And when it's the only path being offered in mainstream healthcare and it doesn't work for so many people, it's really great that we now are starting to be able to say, hey, microdosing might be a path for you. And
Mhm.
I think this path also encourages people to do the work, because there really is no pill that's going to fix you ever,
Yeah.
right?
It can
Whether
help
it's a
you to fix
microdose capsule
yourself,
or a
perhaps,
prescription.
but yeah, I actually had another woman on the podcast. Her name was Amber, and she is and owns a company called Mental Health Rebels, and she like exclusively focuses on helping people come off pharmaceutical meds. And she was telling me that the brain chemistry narrative is like a complete myth. The
Yes.
imbalance of brain chemistry is like a myth that was originated through Prozac campaigns,
Hmm.
and that there's no such thing as like an imbalance in brain chemistry, and that actually what happens is the pharmaceuticals alter our brain chemistry themselves. Do you subscribe to that same
I do.
thing?
I do. I've dug through this research quite a bit. We make our brain chemistry every single day.
Yeah.
So barring pretty extreme um, mental health expressions, our brain chemistry is very much dictated. I mean, you can have altered brain chemistry from a mineral imbalance, and you just need to eat different foods and support your body in that way to produce the right doses. And that can happen really overnight.
Yeah.
It's like our brain is making it's a chemistry lab and it's always producing, but there is no like, this Prozac campaign that started promoting especially depression as being like, oh, I have, something's wrong with my brain chemistry, so I
Mhm.
have depression. And yeah, I'm totally with her 100%. There's
Yeah.
amazing research that really says that that's actually not how it works at all, and we're making brain chemistry every day. And then when we do take pharmaceuticals, it absolutely is altering our brain chem. I mean, amphetamine, SSRIs, those are altering our brain chemistry in
Oh
a
yeah.
manipulated fashion. And so
I've
things
taken Adderall before in college. It altered my brain chemistry.
right? Yeah. And then when it leaves your system, it's like someone just totally drained the gas tank, and the
Oh,
brain is now not been producing its own chemical cocktail. And so there's just nothing in there, and it is really uncomfortable.
oh my God. I know I used to take Adderall all the time, like not prescribed, just like getting it from like whoever had extra random Adderalls in college. And it was so like the coming down off of it was so uncomfortable that I would like binge drink just to like alleviate that raw feeling from like over just from overdoing it, from like putting myself in hyperdrive. And then the way that I would feel afterwards was so depleted and edgy and just like wanted to crawl out of my skin. And um yeah, and so I definitely it's interesting because I feel like that whole like some people just have different brain chemistry is like an oversimplification based upon like what you're saying and just my understanding of like the body as well as it's always, at different levels. And like you said, diet can play a role, stress can play a role, gut health can play a role in your brain chemistry. Drinking affects gut health and brain chemistry, what you're, all the things that you're choosing to do. Probably like people pleasing and perfectionist and critical inner dialogue. I'm sure like literally every input that we are exposing ourselves to on a daily basis can impact brain chemistry. So, yeah, I wanted to see if like you say that too, because in certain rooms of people, people would probably get very triggered hearing
Mhm.
that because I still
Yeah.
hear that quite often a lot, actually, especially with everything going on in the health realm politically and people being like up in arms about SSRIs being taken away, which I don't think is going to happen. And I can see both sides of people feeling like, I don't want this to be stigmatized, but also like just sharing alternative methods to support mental health as well. And
Mhm.
one thing you said too that really stood out to me was we were talking about just this feeling of like being alive and when we're on certain medications, how people feel like they're just existing. And I'm wondering, because that was a big thing for me, like tapping back into my life force and recognizing like, wow. I have like so much beautiful energy, just like myself, and feeling that like zest for life, as corny as that sounds, but seriously, it is.
Yeah.
Um, and I'm wondering, like, from your perspective, what percentage of people do you think are like existing and living versus like what percentage of people do you think are like
Mm.
really tapped into their life force, really like tapped into like what it
Whew.
feels like to be alive and connected to themselves?
Well, if we use statistics on how many people are on SSRIs and other mood stabilizers, it's like over 70% of the population in America.
Fascinating.
So, I mean, I would say that about 70% of people are not feeling alive,
Yeah.
and maybe
And that's
more.
only one method of like tamping us down.
Yeah, yeah.
So it's very interesting. And I feel like, yeah, once you kind of step into an empowered, like once you feel it, you're like, God damn, like I can't believe I robbed myself of this for so long. Like the presence, the like experience of every day, and just kind of numbing ourselves out. So it's it's eye-opening. So tell me who you think could benefit from medicinal plant use, microdosing, like in your eyes, like what type of people, and also not just who could benefit, but like um what state of mind and like consciousness
Hmm.
level and like readiness, like where do you have to be ready to like experiment with microdosing and have it actually be effective?
Yeah, that's a really, really great question. And I'll start by saying I am I'm kind of a renegade in most things, in the way I look at health and the way I look at body autonomy. And so I will say that I have no judgment, and I don't really subscribe to there being rules and a right way and a wrong way for how people can use medicines and take care of their body. So I'm like all
Same
for
girl.
people doing what works for them,
Yes.
and I will always promote that. And I think some people certainly should consider having skilled support, even at the level of microdose. So it's like, yes, you could go do this on your own, absolutely. And some things may come up depending on your overall like constitution. And so should you maybe have a professional have some kind of support in place to help guide you through that? Because what I don't want to see, and I always do care about the most, is that people are having a beneficial experience, a healing experience, that we're not contributing to the pre-existing difficulties in life, and that we're promoting and practicing all of our health choices in a way that is like conducive to a good experience, right?
Mhm.
So having said that, the people who I think can benefit are a wide range. And I've personally worked with everyone from moms to entrepreneurs to like super high level CEOs, and helped work on things from, sexual trauma, relationship trauma, more health trauma, which has become, a big niche for me given my own health experiences, to some really creative CEOs who just want to know how they can expand their state of creativity and tap more into their level of consciousness that is accessing, possibility and imagination, and to watch that grow. So
Mm.
really, it can be supportive for a wide range of things. There doesn't have to be anything wrong to want to see what microdosing could do for you, or even bigger plant medicine experiences. And there could be things that you're perceiving as problems or challenges to where this could benefit. I think it's a great tool if you're wanting to taper off of pharmaceutical medications. I think it's a great tool if you're exploring sobriety and noticing that you are finding it challenging. One of the beautiful things about microdosing, especially, is that in a very subtle, very gentle way, it starts to expand and activate and alter our neural web. So all of the neural network, all of the synapses and neurotransmitters, and we don't have to feel it, and it's just happening. Even if we take such a small dose that we don't feel a single thing, our neural network is still being supported in a really positive way. And it allows us to work on our transformation in a very gentle, bite-sized way, which is not actively promoted in our society. Typically, it's
Mm.
like big, intense, make it hard. It's got, and if you've
Which
had
is like
trauma,
precisely why I feel like lifestyle is so hard for people to like actually get behind, because they have on the other side, like, take this pill and move on with your life and continue on
yeah,
the assembly line of overwhelming life construction and design.
yeah,
It's
yeah,
like, all right, I guess I have to do this because I don't even have time to change my lifestyle. It's like all gearing us towards, immediate gratification and like keeping up with these overwhelming lives we're programmed to build
mhm,
that half of us aren't happy with and have to take SSRIs to like get through and to like
yeah,
exist through. And so I love that you highlighted that, because that's like something for me that I think is like one of the biggest pieces of trying to support people, is recognizing like nothing is going to happen overnight that's like truly going to be lasting. And so just like wrap your mind around that.
mhm.
Get rid of the idea that like you're going to be a new person after not drinking for 2 months. Like, let's just let that go now.
Yeah, very well said. Yeah, and I think it's also really important, especially for the folks who are dealing with something we might categorize as trauma, or, bigger issues and maybe heavier addiction. It's I know I can say I was this way. I got very adapted to intense experiences. So there, we kind of build a threshold for like, if it's not big and hard, I almost can't really, I don't know if anything's happening.
Peace
Um,
feels weird.
Yes, yeah. Boring is uncomfortable. Peace is uncomfortable, right?
Peace
But
is
it's
boring.
yeah, yeah, exactly. So I think there's really something to starting to shift that concept around like, hey, actually, you can heal and it can be gentle and it doesn't have to like blow the roof off. And we can really take this approach. And there will be plenty to work on in the gentleness, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Because as I think you were just pointing to, a lot of us are living lives that we need to medicate ourselves to be able to get through, and that's what's
Mhm.
happening. Is it's just like, so I really like to look at like, what is going on in your life, how are you creating this as such that you feel like you need to be medicated to survive it, to do your life, and taking that bit by bit,
And
like
like,
one
who's telling you that like that's the life we're supposed to be building? Like, why are we listening to this shit and subscribing to these things? Or, and I think like, that a lot of people um kind of just adhere to their belief systems that they've been programmed with, and they build lives according to like external measures of success and expectations and what everyone else is doing. It's like never really measuring it against our own internal compass.
Mhm.
And one thing in the psychedelic book club I'm in right now, we were talking about this, and one thing that I really resonated with me, like more generally as to like who can benefit is I just always feel like, you have those waves of healing, and sometimes in it like ebbs and flows, like you go through a wave and you're like feeling empowered and you're kind of like on the peak of like breakthrough, and then you have plateaus, and then you kind of have like moments where you're like, oh, I'm going through this shit again. I already got through this. And then
Mhm.
you have moments where you're like, I feel like I'm on the cusp of something, but I can't quite like break through to it. And that
Yeah.
was like how we kind of described, like many of us, like that idea of like what attracted them to microdosing and us to the book club in general is like when you just can't quite like itch that scratch of the next level, and
Uh-huh.
you're like, I maybe need like a little facilitation here. And the other thing you said that I really resonated with me was like making like it, yeah, you can do these things on your own, but like how much more effectively and supportively and can you do it with someone guiding you and ushering you along the way. That's like what coaching is, right? It's like, yeah, you can get sober on your own, and but there's people to help you. There's like ways that's going to be so much easier, and you're going to get so much more out of it with someone guiding you who's been down the same path.
Yeah. Yep, very, very well said. I do offer women's only microdosing group, and it's a 3-month program. It's called Rise and Shine. And this cohort right now, just as an example, there's a couple of women in there who are navigating divorce. And so they felt like, okay, I want this extra support, both with microdosing, but also like in a coaching container in a space where I am, being supported with other tools. There's someone in there navigating a health challenge. There's one person in there who thinks her life is great, but she's like, I want to know what else is possible. And I was curious about
Yeah.
microdosing and didn't feel safe, like just going, doing it in the wild, wild west on my own. Um, and there's a couple, so it's like there's a lot of reasons we might come to it. And there are different substances you can microdose. And so I think that's also really important to note is like, would the best thing for you to use is psilocybin, or would it be LSD, or would it be San Pedro cactus? And what do you know about these substances, and how are they going to is your body going to experience them? And do you know even how much to take and how often to take them? And you can Google a lot of this stuff, but you will get a wide range of information, and none of that addresses the moment where you are processing something that has bubbled to the surface, through the use of microdosing, and then being like, oh, I don't know where that came from, and how do I want to be with that? And um, so yeah,
Mhm.
it's it's
Yeah.
it's it's a big exploration, and a worthy one in my humble opinion.
Yeah, for sure. And so we talked a little bit about this like idea of how who it can be helpful for and what it can be helpful for. But I feel like, especially with this book I'm reading, it's called um Mysteries of the Psychedelic Feminine or something like that.
Oh,
I think I showed it to you. I'm probably getting the title wrong, but they talk a lot about how, psychedelics can help to usher back in some of the lacking archetypal feminine energy that the world, specifically like our culture in the US, is missing. And that imbalance is kind of like what's keeping us all sick if you think of like archetypal masculine energy and the lack of like sensitivity, compassion, slowing down, intuition,
mhm,
spiritual
mhm,
connection.
mhm.
And so that kind of ties into my question about like how do you feel plant medicine could play a role in being healing on like a larger scale, globally, more collectively?
That's a great question. You did so well to highlight this sort of epidemic of imbalance in how we do our society. And, I'll say we wouldn't get a damn thing done without masculine energy. It is what has built everything, and it's so important. This podcast wouldn't exist. We wouldn't be sitting here doing
Oh, I
this,
got a lot of masculine energy. Like
Yeah,
hyper
yeah.
productivity, still fighting that one.
Right. And you are so right in that there is this aspect of being a harmonious society. And when we're saying that, we're talking about macro and micro. Like, to be a harmonious society, we have to have harmonious individuals, and vice versa. And so there's something really beautiful and important about reconnecting to softness, to slowness, to gentleness, to nurturing just ourselves and each other, and to developing a deeper relationship with our intuition, because our intuition is directly correlated to our state of awareness. Like, we have to listen, we have to become aware that there is always a stream of messages available to us. We simply have to become aware of that, right? And that awareness of our intuition is what helps us live a life of aliveness. Like, our aliveness is created by following our intuition, and all of that requires us to be available,
Present.
um, present, right? Empty, non-attached, empty of agenda. And we live very much agenda oriented. I would challenge everyone listening to try to look over the next couple of days at where I'm going to use a word, and it usually has a negative connotation, but in this case, just think of it as neutrally as you can, but where you manipulate moments, experiences, conversations, because you have an agenda, and it's usually to be liked, to be accepted, to get things to go your way, to go the way you think that they should go for an outcome that you're attached to, right? And so it's a little bit beyond having desires and preferences, which are wonderful things to have. And they're an important part of aliveness as well. But there's this other part where we're more in our ego, we're more in fear that something could go wrong if it doesn't go the way we're imagining. We're shutting off our creative capacity when we do that, and narrowing what's possible. And microdosing is really, really amazing for opening that back up, and in this really intuitive way. So
Mm.
I can imagine a more beautiful world of harmonious, alive, centered, present people, should we bring these plants back into our society in,
Yeah.
in a healthy and um, integrous way.
Yeah. Yeah, I think too that broadening of perspective is really what comes to mind for me. I think so many of us are limited by our own like wounds or belief systems we're not even realizing. And we have like really narrow perspectives that can be really judgmental or like more of a fixed mindset instead of a growth
Yeah.
mindset. And it does seem to make quite a contentious society when everyone's like operating from, the energy of their wounds or like subconscious programming. And yeah, and you also touched upon something that resonated with me earlier was just this like increasing level of compassion for ourselves. And
Mhm.
I've found like the more I become like gentle with myself and realize, you know, how different versions of myself were likely operating from fear or insecurity or scarcity. And then being able to draw that awareness to myself, you can kind of like see it more in other people and also have compassion. Not all the time, still frustrating sometimes when people are in victim mindset or like they're super stuck and and especially when people are super stuck and they are kind of on attack mode, it's like, all
Yeah,
right. If you're stuck, you're stuck, but like it's not my problem.
yeah.
And then the other thing you said, the agenda thing, one thing that's really been helping me with that like control feeling lately, anytime something doesn't go my way and I'm immediately feeling that reaction of like, oh, like this is like pissing me off because it was supposed
Mhm.
to be like this. I'm like, what if you just got saved from like the shittiest experience ever? What if like now that that's not happening, something else is happening? And just
Mhm.
like that open-mindedness to possibilities beyond your awareness. And like I just am usually try to transmute it to like gratitude and be like, hey, I think the universe just saved me and I'm just gonna tell myself that even if it's not true.
Well, I have a phrase that can be really helpful for this. When I have a desire or preference for something to go a certain way, um, I tell myself this or something better.
I love that. Yeah,
So
exactly.
it's like I'm envisioning this is what I would like to happen, but instead of getting all attached and in my agenda and then like starting to contort and cling to and like try to make it happen that way, I first of all, curiosity is like the key to everything I think in life. And so I'm like
Mhm.
the best we can all do to start making curiosity be our mindset and our way of looking at things. So then I try to approach life as much as possible from the state of curiosity, and then I bring in my desire, preference, whatever it is. I would really like it to work out this way, and then I say this way or something better, because then it's like I'm not attached to the actual outcome. I'm I'm seeking a feeling. And this is where it's like, if we can all rewire to that, we're seeking a quality of an experience, we're seeking a certain feeling. We're not actually seeking a specific choreography of like, I want something to look just like this. Because guess
You're
what?
like,
Even
that's
if
what
it
you
does,
think. Yeah.
yeah, you might not like it. It might turn out that way, and then it might be like, oh, I didn't actually like it. So it's like, if you really get clear and honest with yourself all the time, our preferences and what we're interested in is a feeling. We want to have an experience that feels a certain way. So if you are imagining how that might look, it's like, okay, I imagine the experience to look like this, and but my desire is for this feeling. So then it's like this or something better. So then I know the outcome. It's like I'm just always available for it to unfold in whatever way is going to feel the most fulfilling. And it could be this, it could be something better.
Yeah. Yeah, it's inviting co-creation with the universe. It's inviting possibility beyond your limited thinking. It's inviting opportunity and openness and it's yeah, I've been really and it allows you to just enjoy the process because you set more
Yes,
of like
sister. Yes.
and because you're like, I set the intention and now like I'm taking aligned action, but it's like that can't be it. And it's that balancing of masculine and feminine energy too. Like it's good to take aligned action. It's good to be intentional. It's good to have goals, but to like only have that can then be limiting. It can then prevent us from experiences that are like even closer to what we actually desire in terms of like feeling and
Mhm.
emotion and
Mhm.
the actual like vibe of our life. And so I that's been a big transition for me too over the past like I'd say few years. I've gotten a lot better with just kind of detaching and being like, I have enough evidence now that I'm on the right path, that the universe has my back. Like I don't
Yeah,
need to be stressing this shit. I'm just gonna let it unfold. I work hard enough. I don't need to worry on top of it,
exactly.
fixate, ruminate.
Well, and I mean, is the process is everything.
hmm
The process is life. The whole thing is a process, and it's like all all life is experience. It's experience upon experience upon experience. Each present moment is an experience, right? So the process is the thing. It is what we're doing. And so
hmm
we're, really having to reorient away from, outcome focused, because the outcome is over the moment it happens. It's,
Which
and then
gets
you're
people
still in,
addicted to that
yeah,
goalpost. The next thing, it's like
yeah,
you didn't even celebrate this thing you just thought was going to make you so happy,
yeah.
but it's because you're missing the point. Like,
Yeah, were you even in the
yeah,
process in the first place?
yeah,
The process is the whole point. So it's like if we're not feeling fulfilled in the process, and I'm not oversimplifying the fact that there are moments whenever we're trying to build something meaningful, there are moments that are not like the most pleasant, especially for us
yeah,
entrepreneurs there. But
yeah, yeah,
you have an awareness that the bigger picture of aliveness and fulfillment exists within the creative process.
yeah.
Um, and yeah, so it's just like reorienting really to that. And that requires the thing that you're saying, that I call like trust. I trust myself and I trust in life. And when I can
Mhm.
really like root into that trust that everything is always conspiring in my favor and I'm co-creating a masterpiece, and I just trust how it's unfolding because it is going to be this or something better, right? And
Yeah,
so yeah, yeah, cultivating that.
yeah, and I
Huge.
think
And
that
microdosing is so helpful for that.
yes, I know, like that release and being like, I'm taken care of. And also being like, I'm our instead of like constantly focusing on the next, like that idea of leaning into gratitude for what all you've created, like that's really feels really soothing to my little sense of urgency soul. Sometimes
Mm.
I'm like, you're already a success. It's only going to be better. Like you're saying, like you just appreciate like what you've created instead of constantly being like, what's next? What's next? It's like if you told yourself 5 years ago what you'd be doing now, you'd be like so happy. And so just giving yourself that reminder, like every little win is worthy of celebrating and being present for and really acknowledging instead of just quickly moving on to like what's next, even though that's kind of what we're so indoctrinated with. And yeah,
Mhm.
I really see like plant medicine as a big component of like awakening and integration and healing that the world needs, and also just this breaking free. Like I noticed throughout our conversation, you said, I think this and this. And you could perhaps think that these may be conflicting, but it's an and. And I really love that because I think it's so missing in our society. Like we love compartmentalizing people, we love stereotyping. It's like shortcutting for our brain to just be like, judgment, labels, stereotyping. You do this one thing, so you must be this kind of person. And I think like that lacking of nuance in the way that we talk to people, the lack of curiosity, um, the lack of ability to hold space for multiple truths at one time is like really what's eating away at like our society and interpersonal relationships. And I feel like psychedelics kind of open that door for people to be like a bit more open-minded and compassionate and um, nuanced.
Do you have a sense of why it is that that's happening right now? That why do humans tend to compartmentalize and judge and label and not be able to hold paradox?
Do I have a sense,
Yeah,
my feelings as to why that is?
yeah.
Well, I think for me that I think there's a lot of forces that program us in ways that are like divisive in nature. I think a lot of like our limiting programming is kind of I don't know if I feel like it's maliciously intentional in some ways. But then I also feel like I'm big into, astrology and the evolution of our like consciousness. And I think we're kind of in a time right now where that's like we're breaking free of compartmentalized thinking and like old systems of functioning that are kind of archaic, and we're like growing out of them. And I
Mm.
feel like that there's just this like feeling of upheaval and chaos preceding great transformation. And I kind of feel like that black and white thinking is like forcing us against each other in ways that are like actually fueling growth eventually. But it's kind of
Mm.
like the dark night of the soul is my take on it all. What about you?
Cool. Yeah, what from what I see, I believe that difficulty that people have in holding multiple truths, and they really need things to be a certain way, like you do this and think that, so it means this about you, and it means is really rooted in I'm just going to say self-worth issues. And we all have them, all that same theta
Mm.
0 to 7 brain state that tells us how we are in the world and what we need to do to be loved and not kicked out of the cave and thrown to the wolves, right? Is like,
Uh,
I need to be this way to be safe and to not feel rejected and not be abandoned. And so that makes a collection of like self-worth issues, like how, those insecurities. And so then we adopt behaviors and beliefs that help us try to feel safe. And that requires us to kind of live in a box, right? Of like, I behave this way so that I don't get rejected, so that I'm
mm.
included in society, in my family, in this community, in these different environments. And so when people behave outside of that, they must be a bad person. There's like, because I'm trying to be a good person, and the way I know I'm a good person is when I follow these things that help my ego feel like I'm safe and I'm in my comfort zone, and
Yeah.
everything that's happening in here is appropriate and acceptable, and this means I'm a good person. And so
Yeah.
when things show
You
up that
see that a
challenge
lot.
that,
Like
it's
in
like,
the Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, when things come up that challenge that, the brain, the ego is always doing that labeling and compartmentalizing, because it's like, I need to know that I'm a good person. And so if these things are happening that are outside of the parameters that I've determined make me a good person and keep me safe and protect my like self-worth issues, my pain body. So then when something challenges that, it's like, oh, okay, that's bad.
Yeah. Sometimes it almost seems like that innate human nature of like it's been like weaponized against us with
Yeah.
politics and stuff, with like virtue signaling and being like, you're a good person if you think like this, and if you don't think
Yeah.
like this, you're a bad person. And it's very like limiting to the complexity of um different topics and stuff where you almost like can't even say some things. You're going to be rejected from the group if
Cancel
you hint at
culture.
using language like certain type of way. And yeah, and I think too, I believe, my spiritual sort of exploration and whatnot. I've always been like pretty spiritual, but I've read like quite a few books on reincarnation and stuff like that, and just the idea that Earth really is like a school for our soul. And I think the idea of like duality is a big part of that school. And that like there has to be darkness to kind of allow, like there has to be that duality, otherwise it would just be a utopia, and how would we grow here? And so I
Hmm.
feel like definitely that kind of duality and compartmentalization is very like permeates our society and the world a lot, because I think it's part of like what our curriculum is to like realize
Mm.
like
Yeah.
okay, there is these both of these things, like both of these things we need both, but like how do we hold space for it all,
Yeah.
and without feeling like it has to be this way of like hiding behind our ego and like our identity as a human. It's like
Yeah.
no, you
Yeah.
can have space for multiple truths and like stay curious and not feel like you need to identify in a certain type of way in a certain group of people to be a good person, or all of that is just kind of breaking free of the black and white of it all
Mhm.
is part of like Earth School.
Yep. Love that.
Yeah. So, oh, this was so fun. I loved it. And
Yeah.
so tell us where I want you to share. Oh, you have to share where people can find you and like what your offerings are, and also your bonus offer for any listeners.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, you can definitely find me on social media. Um, I would say though, one of the best places to look is at MORPHA, MORPHA, riseandshine.com. That is the women's transformational microdosing group that I mentioned. And so you can come see what that's all about. Then, if you're interested in psychedelic work and maybe you're not a woman or you want to work with me privately or you want to participate in other ways, I am giving everyone who is listening here 22 minutes to come ask all your questions. So you can set up free 22-minute call with me and ask anything you want. So if you have contraindications, if you just have curiosities about different psychedelics, and you just don't know who to ask to get like real safe information, or you feel embarrassed or you want to remain anonymous, whatever your reasons, you can just come ask whatever you want, no strings attached, and I'll happily talk with you. So you can do that at, I think it's new, so forgive me, I think it's tinyurl backslash aliveness revival.
I have it here.
You do.
Yes.
You tell me.
tinyurl.com backslash aliveness revival. You are correct.
Brilliant. You said
That is
it
the one.
correct in the right order, though. Yeah. So there's a spot there that you can sign up if you want to spend 22 minutes talking with me about psychedelics and which ones might work for you or not. And yeah, and then you can find me on Instagram at Launa, Launa, at Morpha VIP. And I'm very friendly and easygoing and like happy to just talk with you about anything related to what's going on in your life and how psychedelics may or may not be a good option for you. And I just want people to know that there's like safe places to ask these questions um, and to know that like people are in your corner and living a life of aliveness. It's totally possible, and it's your birthright. So why not? You know?
Yeah, that's right. A life of aliveness is possible
Yeah.
and, deserved.
Yeah, I mean, it's our birthright. It's like the whole reason we're here.
Yeah. And I wish I just like wish more people realize that they like can create whatever they want if they're willing to like step up to the plate for themselves. And so, yeah, we have a very similar message with that. Like creating a life of your own design. Like it's so powerful that when you realize like, wow, I actually don't have to like follow all these little rules and things that make my soul feel like it's dying inside.
I mean, we are imagination in a skin suit. We are literally creativity enveloped in these bodies. So we have so much capacity and ability beyond our wildest dreams. And we're just, most of us are tapping into such a tiny amount. So
Yeah.
it's like, just remember that you are pure imagination and really anything is possible. And what happens if you tried to live from that perspective, just even a little bit?
Yeah. I'll leave us on this quote that I saw from Brene Brown recently, where she said something along the lines of like, so much of like our unhappiness and self-medication is rooted in like dormant or unused creativity. And I
Mhm.
really think that is so true. I think like a huge reason that I self-medicated with alcohol was like that lack of connection to creativity and really like having something that I was passionate about. And doesn't always have to be our work, but just like tying our profession. But I think, considering we spend a lot of time in our profession, it is helpful if you have some sort of creative attachment to it. But I just think that, yeah, creativity is so underemphasized in our society, and it's literally like what we're doing here to create from the
Yep.
unique essence of our energy and spirit and our like pulling from the ether, the collective consciousness, and then regurgitating it through our lens is medicine for everyone.
Yeah.
And I don't think like we realize how many people feel like they are existing because they're not creating. And that's what has made me feel alive.
Yeah, there's an existential angst when we're not expressing our creative capacity and abilities, and it's what we're here for, and it's so crucial. And I'm so happy to see more and more people talking about creativity and its importance. So I'm glad we
Yeah.
ended there. Thank you
Yes,
for this.
love it. Well, thank you so much for coming on. Everyone, take advantage of Lana's 22-minute question session. Seriously, she's a wealth of information and just really wonderful to chat with, as you've heard. So go find her. And thank you so much for coming on. Thank you so much for listening. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share if this episode resonated with you. And I'd love to hear your thoughts as well, like are psychedelics and microdosing something you've used or considered along your sober curious path, your healing path. Share with us your feedback and thoughts. We would love to hear. And otherwise, go be living.
Mm.
Bye.